Wonderhussy here, out in the middle of nowhere with my good old buddy Larry for a 4-day trip exploring the deepest reaches of the most barren, inhospitable regions of the Mojave Desert. We just left the Kelso Depot where we saw the big boy steam locomotive come in. It was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And this is our second stop of the trip. We're out here for 4 days, so we've got a lot of ground to cover, but Larry is taking me around and showing me some of the stuff he's found. Now, this is an interesting part of the desert, sort of, I guess you would call it south of Death Valley, just outside the town of Baker. Now, if you've ever driven from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, or vice versa, you know Baker. Baker's that little blip in the road, bunch of overpriced gas stations, and a giant thermometer. In fact, it's the world's tallest thermometer, celebrating the fact that the highest temperature ever recorded was in Death Valley. I think it was 134 degrees. There was a higher temperature recorded in Iraq or someplace, or Libya, I think, but it wasn't officially, I don't know, checked or sanctioned or whatever, so they don't count that. Anyways, because of the highest temperature, they put the world's biggest thermometer in Baker just to try to get people to stop, because I guess they're desperate for money. Now, normally I don't stop in Baker for gas because it's crazy expensive, but on this trip, oh gosh, I was in a hurry to get to that Kelso Railroad Depot in time to see that steam locomotive, and as usual, I was running late. I had a series of unfortunate events this morning that conspired against my arriving at the depot on time, and you can hear all about that in my railroad video. But I wasn't able to top off my gas before I left town because I was in such a hurry. And Larry and I are going out into the deep desert. So I needed to make sure my gas tank was full because that's Desert Exploring 101. You don't go out into the desert without a full tank of gas. Well, unfortunately for me, the only gas station around, I had two options, Baker and Shoshone. And if you've ever been to Shoshone and seen the gas prices there, you'll understand why I decided to stop in Baker instead. It was $4.55 a gallon. Bah! But, had to do it. So I was just gassing up when what should happen? A Jeep came up, pulled right in behind me. Wonderhussy, you're not paying for your own gas. It was one of my viewers, this friggin' awesome woman named Abby. Hi, Abby, who insisted on paying for my gas for me, which was very sweet of her. And I tried to force the money back on her, like, you don't have to do that. But she insisted. So this expedition is sponsored by Abby, actually. So what you're about to see, you can thank Abby for. But anyway, speaking of Baker, the reason Larry brought me here to this stop is there's a very interesting person in Baker history buried in a little lonely cemetery here. Check this out. Okay, you can hardly even read the sign because it's so sun-baked, but it says Silver Lake Cemetery. And then there's this really cute little metal American flag somebody put on there. Now, Silver Lake, I just learned from Larry, was a town, or a military base actually, on that dry lake bed across the highway there from our cars. Well, apparently back in the day there was some kind of either Army or Air Force base over there and an actual town site. It's all long gone now, nothing left but foundations. But the cemetery is still here. And this is where... Well, if you look at the graves, there's Larry over there, you'll notice that one grave in particular seems to be a little bit fancier than all the others. This kind of reminds me of the video I made at the Ballarat Cemetery. They have a similar kind of setup there. There's one really fancy grave for seldom seen Slim, and then all the other graves are kind of, forgotten about. But over here, we have same thing. One pretty fancy grave, and then a bunch of, almost forgotten ones. But guess what? I'm here to check them out. No grave shall be left untouched. I'm going to pay my respects at all of them. But for the sake of this video, we're going to go to the big kahuna first. Now, first of all, before I approach the graves, just a quick pan so you can see what a lonely desert this is. Lonely Desert Cemetery. Kind of a haunting, lonely place to be buried. And it's hotter than blazes. I mean, it's October 8th. So it's not quite as hot as the summer, but it's still hot. Okay, so let's go right up to it. No beating around the bush. This fancy grave here is the grave of somebody called Death Valley Jack. Now, if you Google Death Valley Jack, all you're going to come up with is some information about a long distance ultra runner, one of them crazy guys that does the Badwater Marathon. And I'm sure that Death Valley Jack is equally interesting. But that's not the Death Valley Jack we're here to talk about today. This Death Valley Jack's real name was Harry W. Nickerson. He lived from 1897 to 1932. Anyways, he's noteworthy as being one of the founding fathers of Baker. Now, you probably didn't even realize Baker's an actual town. But that's right, it's not just gas stations and the mad Greek and the world's tallest thermometer. It's actually a town, people live there. And this guy, Death Valley Jack, was, well, one of the, I guess, early citizens. Baker, I guess, used to be a railroad stop on the Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad, which operated back during his lifetime. And it ran all the way, well, from what's now I-15, all the way up to near Beatty. So it was a pretty big railroad back in the day. And I guess he lived in Baker and he operated a restaurant there. But he was also noteworthy for trying to help stranded motorists. Remember, this was back in the early days of the automobile. So there was all these, there were all these old-time wealthy people with Model T Fords cruising around Death Valley trying to look at the sights. And, wow, you can imagine how it was back then. There weren't very many roads, and these Model T Fords weren't exactly like my Toyota 4Runner. They got stuck in the sand a lot, things broke down. So Death Valley Jack did what he could to improve the roads so that there would be less people getting stuck. In fact, Larry was telling me that Death Valley Jack was almost single-handedly responsible for grading this entire highway, which runs from, well, it actually runs all the way from Amargosa Valley by the US 95 down through Death Valley Junction and Shoshone all the way to I-15 in Baker. It's California 127, kind of a lonely desert highway. Well, this guy, Death Valley Jack, was one of the first people to grade it out and make it a better road so that all these old-time pleasure cruisers wouldn't get stuck. So thank you for your service, Death Valley Jack. We appreciate what you did. The road we're driving on now is paved asphalt. You know, then they put the interstate in, and after the railroad was taken out, now it's just a bunch of gas stations on the interstate in Baker. But like I said, there's still people who live there, so it's actually a little town hanging on by its toenails. And I need to go make a video all about Baker. I'm going to do that one of these days. But anyway, like I said, I'm not just here to see Death Valley Jack's grave. I might as well pay my respects to the other people that are buried here from Silver Lake. I'm guessing they're probably all military veterans if they lived on a military base. So let's check them out real quick and pay our respects at each grave. Okay, down here on the right we have, oh gosh, something Smith, born in 38, died in 08. His friend left a little tape deck for him there. Is that an 8-track player or a tape deck? He must have liked music. Oh, and somebody left a screwdriver for him, so I guess he was into tools. Kind of like a, what's that, like little gauge or something there? Aww. Must have been like a mechanic kind of a guy. Got the flag waving there. Now look at this guy over here. Artie Jenkins Sr. He was private first class in the Army in World War II. Born 26, died in 08, and apparently he was a Bud Light drinker, or beer drinker. Somebody left him a beer. Next in line we have, Floyd James Crabtree. Born 21, died 96. Nothing really here to tell us about his personality except for some flowers somebody left him, which is nice. At least he's got something. And then his neighbors, we have, it's a couple. Well, let me go. I don't want to walk on their graves. I'll go right up in between them because they're laying together in death just as they did in life. Like Ricky and Lucy in 2 separate beds. John Quincy Lyle III, and then his wife, Dorothy May Lyle. David Walker Lowe, a gold mine in the sky. Oh, he must have been a miner. And his neighbor, oh no, there's no name on his neighbor's grave. Oh, nothing sadder than a no-name grave. Oh, actually, it looks like there's quite a few of them here, unfortunately. I mean, this guy here, he's got his name. Boy, does he. Henry A. Mathis. Probably no relation to Johnny, but you never know. This grave behind him, though, has no name. Another no name. In fact, all these are no names. No name. No name. 3 no names in a row here, and then look behind him, there's 3 other little no names. I don't know if those are no name babies or if those are no name pets. Really sad. Oh no, look at this one. Holy cannoli. This probably is why Larry brought me here. This woman's name was Sarah Jane Cranmer. Oh no, she only lived from May 18th to December 1st, 1989. Oh my God, it's not even that long ago. How sad, a little baby. Now what I think is interesting about this grave, aside from the fact that it's a dead baby, is that's my name, Sarah Jane. That's kind of an unusual name. Like, you know, you meet a lot of people named like Betty Jane or Mary Jane. You don't meet a lot of Sarah Janes. Oh, Sarah Jane, rest in peace. That's my gal. Okay, next to Sarah Jane, we have another no-name grave, but at least this no-name grave is pretty fancy. I mean, look at that. Somebody made a cross out of all those rocks and put some kind of a headstone there, even though there's no name on it. Interesting. Oh, look, there's a couple other little graves off to the side here. Well, there's no name on this one. Just a... Oh gosh, this is actually really sad. It's a little tiny stuffed lamb that they had to put these metal bolts on to keep it from blowing away because it's so friggin' windy out here. And then look at that little homemade cross. Yikes, really sad. And then next to it, it looks like there was a headstone here, but you can't read it anywhere. Nevada Lawler. Gosh, can't even read it. Okay, here's another beer drinker. Ralph Era Clark. Sergeant in the U.S. Army, World War II. Larry was saying that if there's pennies on the grave, that means it was somebody who served with him. So I guess that's why those pennies are on there. Some of his buddies from the war came and left him there. Loving husband and father and pop. Oh, nice. And then he's right next to Donald Dabney, who served in the Marines in Korea. Also got a beer. And then over here we have Gertrude Susan Waldner, a woman who served in the Navy in World War II. Good for her. She was one of them whacks, I bet. I don't know. Was that Navy? And she's next to her hubby, Albert Waldner. Well, it could be her brother, I guess. But he was in the Army in World War II also. Oh, the greatest generation. He died in 86. She didn't die till 2010. Whew. Sorry if it seems like I'm rushing through this, but it's October 8th. It's not really that hot out here, but my phone overheated. And the camera quit working because it got too hot, so I had to go sit in my car with the phone against the air conditioning vent to cool it down, and I'm afraid it's going to overheat again. So I feel like I got to wrap this up quick. So I don't mean to rush through these people's graves. I want to pay my sincere respects. It's just a matter of failing technology. Okay, here's the last two graves we haven't visited yet. Looks like it's another couple. Thelma Craft, loving wife and mother, lived to be almost 100. Next to her husband, John Damon Craft, who was a private in World War II, died in 1999. He also got a beer. I'm going to guess somebody came out here with a pack of Bud Lights and left it on all the guys' graves. It's interesting here, he left one on Albert Waldner's grave, but he didn't leave one on, what was her name, Gertrude? Yeah, what about Gertrude? Maybe she liked beer too. You know, it's not just the men who like to drink. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's the Silver Lake Cemetery. I'm glad I stopped here, if not only to pay my respects to Death Valley Jack's grave, but to also visit all the graves of these other people, and to see that little baby named Sarah Jane. Oh my gosh, I wonder what the story of her is. If anybody knows anything about Sarah Jane Cranmer, please let me know. I feel like I have a connection to her because of our names. Next time I'm out this way, I'll have to bring some flowers or something to her grave. I guess I could bring her a little stuffed animal, as long as I bring some bolts to weigh it down. Alright, well, that was stop 2 on my trip with Larry, and now Larry's got some other stuff in mind that we're going to go check out. So we still have like 3-4 hours of daylight left, so might as well make use of it. Stay tuned for the next stop. Unfortunately, not long after we left Silver Lake, Larry realized he'd lost his wallet. He suspected he'd dropped it a couple days earlier while shooting video in the Kelso sand dunes. But by the time he realized it was gone, we were already 2 hours north of Kelso, and it was too late in the day to go back and look for it. But the wallet had all his credit cards and cash in it, so he had no way to get gas to continue our trip. Thankfully, you might remember that a good Samaritan named Abby had given me gas money back in Baker, which I still had. So I paid it forward to Larry so that we could continue along on our planned 4-day journey. The world works in mysterious and wonderful ways. Thanks, Abby.